2024 has come and gone, so I decided I wanted to make a video on the games I liked playing the most. Keep in mind, these are not necessarily games that came out this year, but ones I played for the first time, or played the most, or enjoyed the most. With that said, let's start with the game that did come out in 2024, Marvel Rivals. I don't really like PvP games. I only play them with friends if I play them at all. With Marvel Rivals, however, I had 12 hours of playtime within the first 2 days. I couldn't tell you exactly what drew me in. Well, that's a lie, I totally can. The fact that it's Marvel drew my eyes to it, and the fact that it's free got me to try it, and boy did it suck me in, like Jeff's ult. That ult is annoying as shit to be caught by, but Jeff is cute, so it's alright with me. Not really. I actually like most of the characters in the game. I've tried out all of them at least once. There's like 10 I cycle between, but I would have played Rivals for Venom alone. Speaking of Venom, look at his profile intro, or whatever it's supposed to be. Rad as hell. That's how you do quality presentation in a game. The gameplay's good too, by the way. That's probably the first thing I should have mentioned. It's somewhat unbalanced, with a couple of characters being ridiculously strong, but I hope they bring other characters up to par instead of nerfing them into the dirt. Which, so far, looks like what's happening, so that's good. Little fun fact about me, I have 1 or 2 games that I play in between recording and editing just so I don't burn out. This has turned into one of those games, alongside Skull the Hero Slayer. This did not come out in 2024, but it definitely owns most of my playtime. Skull the Hero Slayer is a roguelite, or roguelike. I don't know the difference. You are a little bone boy sent to kill everyone who's invading your home. I think. There is a story, I just don't remember it because it's been like a year and a half since I've started playing and I don't remember the story cutscenes. The gameplay is simple but really good. Your different weapons are skulls. Each of them are basically different classes, and there are a shitload of them, so you can find one that suits your playstyle. There are also items with wildly different effects that determine your build and can make or break a run. One thing they do with the items that I really like is there's these little, I guess substats is what you would call them. Basically, if you get multiple items of the same type, it has a special effect. These range from stat increases to summoning meteors at random. It makes it so even if you get a shit item that does something you don't care about, it could have a substat that does something useful. Or you could just recycle the item for gold. Same thing with skulls. They don't have sub things like that other than what type of skull it is, but they do have different rarities and some skulls are better than others. But if you find a skull that you don't like or doesn't fit your build, you could break it for bone fragments that can be used to upgrade the skulls you want to use. This is a roguelite though, which means you could get a bad streak of luck that lasts for multiple runs, but it's always satisfying when you win in the end. For another roguelite that I started playing in 2024, we have The Binding of Isaac: Rebirth. So I've said this before, but at the start of 2024, I got COVID. This is the game I played the shit out of for 2 weeks straight when I was delirious with fever and headaches. Well, maybe it wasn't for that long, but I basically didn't pay attention to anything for a while. It felt like forever. Anyways, The Binding of Isaac is a classic for a reason. This shit is fire, and I can't believe it took me this long to play. I love all of it. The weird, gross enemies and bosses, the weird, gross modifiers you can get to your character, the tragic story of what's actually happening to Isaac. I love it. I also love how it's fucking ginormous, which is to be expected after 13 years of updates and expansions. Holy shit. I don't even think I've done half of what The Binding of Isaac has to offer, but that's fine. I took a break from this gargantuan game to play another one, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I loved Remake. In fact, I think that was my personal game of the year in 2020, besides Doom Eternal, and I liked Rebirth even more. I didn't think Squeenix could make the gameplay of Remake better, but they did somehow, by changing some moves up and making all of your party members feel powerful and useful. Also, you can actually switch your party members out now, which is good. This game is gigantic too, and filled to the brim with stuff to do. Normally, I wouldn't like that. I don't care much for bloated open worlds, but 7's open world worked for me. For like 90% of the game. It was a bit much by the end. Also, Queen's Blood fucking rocks. I like the story too, although you can tell it's the middle part of the original game. It does have a strong ending, but it might as well have ended with a to be continued. Oh, it did. Huh. Anyways, let's swing back to roguelikes for a second. Probably one of the most anticipated releases of 2024, Hades 2. The first Hades is a roguelite masterpiece with an easy-to-follow, overarching story, well-written characters, and supremely amazing gameplay. Hades 2 is more of the same. I don't quite like it more than the first game, but that can change because it's still in early access. Hades 2 does have more content though, at least I think it does. I have not done everything yet, but it really does seem like there's a lot more to do, and I really like what I've played so far. Also, I like Melon No Way as a protagonist. I'm a bit sad to not see my boy Zaggy, but again, early access, that can change. Speaking more on lady protagonists, I also really enjoyed Stellar Blade. This is just a solid-ass game all around. All the parts I care about in an action game are here and strong. You got your basic attack strings with different combos, plus perfect parrying and perfect dodging. You have your special moves and then your super moves. Also, you have a Devil Trigger with its own moveset. The enemy and boss designs are some of the most unique I've ever come across in a game, and most of them are good fights too. Most of them. Fucking dickhead shield asshole. The music is really good too, like really good. The general ambient music is some of the best I've ever heard, and the boss themes are amazing and vary wildly in tone and genre, but they're all good to me. That isn't the theme for this boss, but I wanted to show it off because it's one of my favorites. Swinging back to the combat for a second, for me, it kind of reached that same rhythm that Sekiro has, where you can eventually just perfect your way through a fight without even thinking about it. And speaking of FromSoft games, Shadow of the Erdtree. Okay, so this isn't a game, but it is a humongous expansion to a beloved game that added way more stuff than I was expecting. New armor, spells, incants, weapons, and weapon types, new areas, new enemies, and bosses. They're mostly good. Messmer is my favorite, and Messmer is about as difficult as the bosses should have gotten in the DLC, in my opinion. In fairness, it's only Radahn that I had a massive issue with. Everyone else was fine. Apparently they've patched him to not make him as painful to fight, but I haven't fought him post-patch, so we'll see, I guess, if I ever fight him again. Otherwise, everything else is great, provided you use the Scooby Tree fragments to level up. I don't actually remember what they're called. I've just been calling them that in my head for a while now. The new areas look good, the new weapons rock, literally, and the new weapon types are great. At least the ones I tried were. The enemies are mostly okay too. I think some of them are a little overtuned for how many of them there are on the path you have to tread, but it's mostly fine. Going back to bosses, there is another mega standout. It's Baal the Dread. Straight up the best dragon boss fight in the Souls series. Egon is a godly NPC, and Baal's theme is easily one of my favorites from any game ever. Overall, Shadow of the Erdtree is a worthy addition to the Souls series. Now, we've been talking about a Souls game this whole time, but here's a Souls-like. Can you tell I'm running out of transitions? Lies of P, a 2023 release, you might ask. Well, yes, but I played it for the first time in 2024, so that's good enough for me. This is a really good Souls-like. In fact, I'd put it on par with FromSoft's catalog. It does the best parts of their formula extremely well and adds their own spin on some of it too. Like the weapon assembly system, where you get to pick the handle and blade of your weapon. Handle determines scaling and moveset, blade determines damage, damage type, and attack speed. At least I think it determines attack speed. I'm not too sure on that one. Also, there's these things called Fable Arts, which are attached to the different blades and handles, and these can be game changers that can melt bosses or be a free stagger. There's also boss weapons, and yeah, these are all cool and good. I do wish sometimes the weapon we got was the weapon the boss was holding. It is that sometimes, but not most of the time, which is weird to me. We have two progression systems in the form of leveling up, which is exactly how it sounds, and the much more interesting quartz system. You get quartz in the world and from certain enemies. It's used for upgrades like an extra heal, but for each quartz you put towards the big buffs, you also get to pick small buffs. Good system. The enemies are great too. We got creepy malfunctioning puppets, the infected mutant people, and near the end of the game they start merging together. It probably goes without saying, but the bosses are great too. The actual bosses, not the super NPCs, although those are pretty varied as well. Lies of P also has perfect parrying. A lot of games on this list have that, including Black Myth Wukong. I have not beaten this yet. I want to, but my backlog is gigantic and it keeps infinitely expanding. Anyways, this is a solid action game. At least what I've played so far has been pretty good. The magic spells, the different staff styles are all solid. The real standout part of the game are the bosses. God dang, every single one I've fought so far has been unique, and design-wise, nothing I've ever seen before. I like Tony the Tiger a lot. He was definitely my biggest wall. All in all, pretty good game so far. The reason I didn't complete it is because in the middle of playing it, Space Marine 2 came out. This is a sequel that literally no one expected because the studio that made the first one is dead. Space Marine 2 is a worthy successor to the first game. Combat is vicious, bloody, and brutal. The executions are on par with Doom's Glory Kills, which is one of the highest praises I can give. The bolters are boltery, the chain swords chain so hard, and Titus is my beloved. Honestly, I don't have anything else to say. Space Marine 2 is just a good game. Now for another game that was super surprising, we have Silent Hill 2. I don't think anyone expected this game to be good. I know I didn't. And I'm not one of those Silent Hill 2 cultists that thinks the original game is perfect with no flaws and everything was intentional, but it was still really hard for me to imagine any other studio capturing the spirit and atmosphere of the original while changing or improving anything. But Bloober Team did it somehow. I do think some parts of OG Silent Hill 2 work better, but for the most part, I think the remake is better. Maybe better isn't the right word, but I don't know how else to describe it. And that's the most I'm going to talk about the Silent Hill 2 remake, because I want to make a review on it, and I've got to save some talking points for that. So let's move on to the last game on my list, and my personal game of the year, Metaphor, ReFantazio, or ReFantazio, I don't know. Metaphor is really good, although I will say, I have not beaten this one yet either. Maybe that should have excluded it from being my game of the year, but in my heart of hearts, even considering that I'm not that far yet, I feel as though this is the one. I do love everything I've played so far. The music is amazing, the style of literally all the menus does pleasing things to my brain, and the combat is great. The game is primarily turn-based combat, but in the overworld you can attack enemies to get a preemptive strike that gives them a disadvantage in the turn-based mode. It'll kill lesser mobs instantly, by the way. I also like the archetypes. These are essentially your class. They determine the spells and weapons you have access to, and they can be leveled up and evolved. Leveling them up is obvious. Kill man, get point. Getting the evolved versions is a little different. The main requirement for all of them is reaching a higher level in your social link with the character the archetype is attached to. I know they're not called social links, but I actually can't remember what Metaphor calls them. I like the story a lot too. It's about competing to become the next king. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the overarching goal. Metaphor might be 2024's game of the year for me, but I recommend all the games on this list. I'm going to make this a yearly tradition, and I'm also going to try to be more timely about it this year. This would have been out in like early January, but I had to adjust to a pretty big change in my life, and it took some time. Anyways, tell me what your personal game of the year was in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.